I love art museums. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because they're quiet. I don't get a lot of quiet. Maybe it's because they're cold and kind of relaxing places. Maybe there's a spiritual element to being surrounded by and in the presence of these works of immense artistic genius, the types of creations that I could not possibly replicate even if I trained for years and years and years. I love art museums, but I am bad at analyzing art. I have no idea what's good or what's bad. I just like art museums. In college, I spent the summer studying in Florence. And at my parents' behest, and by the way, they were right because I was going to possibly get this opportunity again. One of the courses I took was on Renaissance art history. It very quickly became apparent that I didn't know what I was doing. I could memorize terms. I could understand who the artists were. I could recognize the different religious and historical figures. But forced perspective, no idea. Could not possibly identify it. Music, I'm good at. Visual art, entirely hopeless. I use this very long introduction by way of letting us sort of get into the mindset of the idea that looking at something and seeing something are not identical. These terms are not interchangeable. There's a very, very big difference, as really seeing something implies a level of really comprehending what's in front of you. This week we read in Genesis 24 that Isaac is described as looking up and seeing camels approaching. I would normally not mention that. That's a very sort of small detail. There's not a lot to read there. I was an English major, and I would say that this is not something I need to overly analyze. Likely, it was not unusual for wealthy people in the desert to see camels approaching. But in the very next verse, the Torah tells us that Rebekah, who was, of course, on one of the camels, she's arriving, and she raises her eyes and sees Isaac. She knows that she's being brought to Isaac to basically marry him, but she had never met him before, which is a conversation certainly for another day. But this concept of her really seeing him, of really knowing, okay, this is the person that I'm coming to be wed with, is important. It's not just another sight at the end of a very long cross-desert journey, but it's the end of the journey itself. I've been thinking a lot recently about this distinction between looking and seeing. Our lives are, of course, quite busy, crammed full of countless ways to distract ourselves. I bet that we each have, right now, on our person, several devices that we can use. Who has more than just a phone with them? Yes, that's what I'm saying. How many of us just randomly scroll through Instagram or TikTok? Not really even taking things in. You're just seeing the stimulation. We are looking at, we have access to endless content, but we're not really seeing anything. We're just looking. And in many ways, of course, this is a lesson that we can take for our interactions with each other. It is incredibly easy for all of us, especially on a campus of 65,000 people, to just walk around, not really interacting with anybody, and just people watch. There's a reason why people like people watching. There's this enjoyment on seeing someone you don't know and you are unlikely to ever see again and grafting onto them the kind of interpretation of their life, even when it doesn't match what reality is. This comes into play certainly in my life. I have two kids. My toddler, it's usually pretty easy to understand what she wants, even if she can't speak all the way because she just yells. But for other children, it's harder. My older son, it's harder because I remember what it's like to be a kid. But that's not my experience. I need to really be listening and looking to what he is trying to tell us. I've also been thinking about this in the context of the election. You guys know me well enough now to know that from this particular place, I try to keep politics entirely separate. I know there are synagogues, perhaps some of you grew up in synagogues, where discussing politics is expected. But here, I try to keep it out. I'm sure all, 25 of us in this room or whatever, had our own reaction to the election. Some people in here were probably extremely happy. Your views were validated by a mandate of American voters. Others of you, definitely in this room, were crushed and wondered why the country had so turned away from what you believe. But for a lot of us, there's a really hard thing here of trying to understand the other group's reaction. Why don't they feel like me? Why don't they see that X or Y? Jeff, you might be thinking, why should I try to see the other side? They reject me and everything I stand for. I hate what they believe in. They hate what I believe in. I'm going to spend every second of the next 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 years working against their agenda. I get it. I hear you. There are views that are incompatible with each other. We do not have to be tolerant of intolerance. What I'm suggesting is that perhaps it's important for us to really see why people have had such strong reactions, not just to the election. There's many, many events going on that I think would warrant this kind of sort of deep dive. Mockery feels good in the moment, but it's not going to get us anywhere without concrete action. Not everyone is worth seeing. There are too many people. There's too much difference. But over the next 7 or 8 weeks before we're back together here, I want you to try to really see someone, perhaps just one person, someone who you may not have really seen or understood before. Shabbat shalom.